It all began in the summer of 1944, when I graduated from high school and turned 18. About 3 or 4 weeks after graduation, this letter came from the President, directing me to report to the Selective Service Building in downtown Madison at 5:45 a.m. on July 19th. From there, we were bused about 75 miles to Milwaukee for our physical exams. It was a long and tiring day, as I recall. I managed to pass the physical, so about a month later, the second letter arrived, ordering me to report to the same place at 6 a.m. on August 21st, all packed and ready to go to war. This time, we were bused to Fort Sheridan, Illinois, just north of Chicago, where we were inducted into the Army, given shots, and issued uniforms. This group picture was taken shortly after we received our new uniforms. You might notice that some are wearing their dress uniforms, and some, including me, are in our work uniforms, or fatigues in Army lingo. It makes for quite a motley-looking group. I marked this photo because I wasn't sure my family would be able to find me in this crowd. Those of us selected for the infantry were then transported by troop train to Camp Wheeler, Georgia, near Macon, for basic training. In spite of the image this picture postcard attempts to portray, Camp Wheeler consisted mostly of sand, red clay, scrub trees, and mud. Where else would they put an Army training camp? In late December, our training was cut short by a couple of weeks because of an urgent need for replacements after the Battle of the Bulge. We were given short furloughs to see our families, and then ordered to report to Fort Meade, Maryland, for a quick shipment overseas to Europe. This picture was taken at the end of basic training at Camp Wheeler. When I arrived in Europe in January 1945, I joined L Company of the 39th Infantry Regiment, 9th Infantry Division. This is the regimental crest, often worn as a pin on our caps. The regimental motto shown here stands for anything, anywhere, anytime, bar nothing. And this is the 9th Division shoulder patch, worn on the left shoulder of our shirts and jackets. You'll see these symbols in many of the pictures coming up. This campaign map of Europe shows the approximate route of the 39th Regiment in France, Belgium, and Germany from October 1944 to September 1945. When I joined them in early January, they were somewhere here in Belgium, recuperating from the Battle of the Bulge and preparing to push into Germany. For the next 3.5 months, the 39th advanced across Germany towards Berlin. We came to a halt in the city of Dessau, on the west bank of the Elbe River, about 60 miles from Berlin. There we waited for the Russians to capture Berlin and to move up to the east bank of the Elbe. We stayed in Dessau for a couple more weeks after Germany surrendered, and then we moved south to the Munich area in the American occupation zone. We settled first in Unterbernbach, a tiny farm village about halfway between Ingolstadt and Eichach. We were there about 4 months. Much of that time was spent preparing to be shipped to the Pacific to take part in the planned invasion of Japan. We had just received our orders to move to Marseille, our embarkation port, when Japan surrendered. Needless to say, we were very happy about that. After another month and a half in tiny Unterbernbach, we moved to the city of Obing, about halfway between Munich and Salzburg. We stayed there about a month, without much to do. Then in October, we moved to Traunstein, in the foothills of the Bavarian Alps. Traunstein became our permanent base of operations for the rest of my overseas duty. Traunstein is situated on a main road between Munich and Salzburg, about 60 miles from Munich and 25 miles from Salzburg. It was not a very large city. I'd guess its population was less than 10,000 in 1945. It's on the Traun River and is about 10 miles from the Chiemsee, the largest lake in Bavaria. This German map of Traunstein that I picked up in a local shop was quite helpful in finding my way around. As you can see, the Traun River loops around the city's east side, and the railroad tracks pass around the west side, with the Bahnhof, or railroad station, near the center of town. In this pictorial map of the Traunstein area, we're looking south toward the Austrian border. Rietemwinkel in the upper center was one of our border posts. Königssee, at the upper left near Berchtesgaden, is an alpine resort town taken over by the U.S. Army after the war. I spent a weekend leave there with several buddies. We had a nice relaxing time. I also spent a couple of days leave in Salzburg while stationed in Traunstein. These first pictures are examples of the typical mode of transportation for the German people in this early post-war period, the horse and cart. Fuel was not available for civilians, so they had to make do with horse carts and bicycles. This German wagon driver stopped and posed when he saw me taking a picture. Nice of him, I thought. Most of the German people we came in contact with were quite friendly and cooperative. They really seemed to like Americans and to be thankful that they lived in the American occupation zone. It seems they were also glad that the war was over. In personal context, they always took great pains to try to convince us that they never liked Hitler or the Nazis. These are Luftwaffe fighter planes, heading for the scrapyard, no doubt. I stopped and watched this soccer game for a while, but I couldn't quite figure out what was going on. Remember, this was 1945, long before soccer became popular in the U.S. These next four pictures were taken from the top of a rickety-looking ski jump on a hill overlooking the Traun River. These two pictures show a pretty little park along the river below the ski jump. Here's the ski jump again, seen from across the river. We're out in the countryside now. You can get a glimpse of the Alps in the distance in this picture. This is Erlstadt, a small village not very far from Traunstein. The church tower you see in these pictures is a common feature in most towns and villages in Bavaria. We pass this little chapel almost every day on our way to and from our guard posts. These are scenes along the Traun River back in Traunstein. This would be a residential area of the city, including apartment buildings. And these are a couple of scenes in the downtown area. Judging from the snow on the ground, I probably took this last group of pictures in January or February. Once again the ski jump. Doesn't that look rickety? Even so, I climbed all the way to the top and took these two pictures. This park with the statue was about a block and a half from our quarters. And here's a group of kids having fun in the snow. This scene sure made me homesick for our sledding days on Ruby Road and out at Sunset Point. Winter scenes in the country. With the Alps in the distance again. Railroad tracks and railroad yards near the Bahnhof or railroad station. A railroad viaduct over the Traun River, and a train crossing it. Finally, a couple of the churches of Traunstein. Traunstein was occupied by L&M companies of the 3rd Battalion, including the battalion headquarters staff and various other supporting groups. There might have been about 300 of us in the city. We were stationed in Traunstein for several purposes, such as guarding German munitions and weapons while they were being disposed of, facilitating the processing and return of displaced persons to their homelands, providing security for the German citizens living in the area, and guarding several border crossings on the Austrian border. We also conducted occasional early morning raids in villages in the region to search for weapons and contraband and for Nazi or SS members trying to hide. All that activity kept us pretty busy. L Company's quarters, or billets in Army lingo, were a short block east of the Bahnhof, seen at the left edge of this map. One block further east on Bahnhofstrasse were M Company's billets. The Red Cross occupied a building on the corner of Kreilsheim and Katharinenstrasse, where they had their donut shop. Further east on Bahnhofstrasse was our Battalion PX, and around the corner from there was our movie theater on Karl Theaterplatz and our nightclub on Maximilianstrasse. So we were pretty well concentrated within a 3-block area in the center of town. This building was L Company's command post, or CP in Army lingo. I took these pictures from a second-floor window in our billets across the alley. These GIs are assembling for guard duty. We also had some training activities to keep us sharp during our stay in Traunstein. But with all the guard duty and traveling around, there wasn't a lot of time for it, which was all right with us. Here's a brief look inside our billets. As you can see, the rooms were quite large. The building was originally a school, but had been used as a hospital during the war. Here's another look at our CP. And this guard post was essentially between our billets and the CP. One of the things we did a lot of when we were off duty was just hanging around. More often than not, German kids hung around with us, hoping we would share candy, chewing gum, or something with them. We usually did. You couldn't help feeling a little sorry for those kids. They had been through a terrible time, and their families were probably struggling now just to have the bare necessities. This picture reminds me of a typical group of neighborhood boys, like back in Madison, with nothing much to do. Sometimes we got ambitious and went exploring. Here's a bunch of us on a footbridge over the Traun River. And these two GIs appear to have found a new friend. I think they both grew up on farms. Some of Traunstein's bomb damage. The city was apparently not a strategic target for bombing or shelling, because I didn't see much damage anywhere except in and near the railroad yards. This picture was taken in front of L Company's billets, and this one in front of M Company's billets. Just as my buddy snapped this second picture, I was distracted by an officer coming up behind me. I may have been debating whether I should salute him. Fortunately, Army discipline was somewhat relaxed during this early phase of the occupation. This is the battalion motor pool. Ah yes, the 2.5-ton truck, the workhorse of the Army. Anything and everything was hauled in these trucks, including GIs. Not a real comfortable ride, but it beat walking. The chaplain's jeep outside our billets. This liberated German Mercedes was used mostly for the officers, but when we had a gasoline shortage during the winter months, this diesel-powered Mercedes came in real handy to post guards. That vehicle on the left is a 1.5-ton truck called a command vehicle. And here is the ubiquitous Jeep, truly a jack-of-all-trades vehicle. These Jeeps are winterized with hard tops and sides, but they were still mighty cold to ride in the winter. This is the Battalion PX, where we could buy snacks, cigarettes, and other stuff when it was available. Our movie theater. Guest wife was playing when I took this picture. This was a really very nice theater, seating almost 1,000. They showed a new movie about every other night, as I recall. The Liberty Club was like a recreation center, with refreshments, games, places to sit around and talk, or read, or whatever. This gymnasium had a basketball court, and was used occasionally for parties and assemblies when a large space was needed. Our enlisted men's club was only open in the evenings. They had a band that played every night, and a floor show once a week. Yes, I went there occasionally, often before or after seeing a movie. The only hard drink I tried was rum and coke, and I remember getting a little tipsy the first few times. Fortunately, it was a short walk home. And finally, the Red Cross building. Those Red Cross folks deserve the highest praise for the job they did for U.S. servicemen and women in World War II, before, during, and after the fighting. One of their more visible efforts was serving coffee, donuts, and cokes to the GIs, whenever and wherever they could. Their presence brought a little bit of home to us while we were over there. This sign on the road into the ammunition dump says, "You guessed it, entrance strictly forbidden." Following are scenes at the ammo dump, which was our primary guard responsibility while in Traunstein. When the war ended, there was a huge amount of German ordnance materials abandoned around the country. This material had to be collected in safe places and guarded until it could be disposed of. Our ammo dump outside Traunstein was one of those places. As you can see, it covered a large area with widely separated piles to minimize the danger if a fire or explosion should occur anywhere in the dump. The explosive material in this dump consisted mostly of TNT, dynamite, and gunpowder, along with artillery, mortar, and anti-tank shells. This is the Mercedes you saw earlier, delivering us to our guard posts in style. There were 3 guard posts at this dump, consisting of these beat-up old trailers as shelters. In the beginning, they had no heat or light, but as winter approached, wood stoves were installed, and they were wired with lights and telephones. There were times when I felt we were a bit vulnerable out there at night, but nothing ever happened, fortunately. The work of clearing out the dump was done by German SS prisoners, as you see in these pictures. They used German army trucks to haul the explosives to a log-lined pit some distance away. There they were blown up, about 5 tons at a time, by our bomb disposal crews. It was quite noisy. I didn't envy those SS prisoners having to handle those explosives, but I don't remember any accidents happening. These final pictures show the ammo dump in the winter months. Another of our guard posts was this small arms warehouse in a suburb of Traunstein. The weapons stored here were mostly pistols, rifles, and machine guns. All had their firing pins removed to destroy their usefulness as weapons. I amused myself occasionally while on duty out there, taking the guns apart and putting them back together again. Must have been the engineer in me. This portrait was taken early in 1945 at a small photo studio in Paris when I was on leave there. I spent a total of about 7.5 months on occupation duty in the Traunstein area, 6 months in the city, and about 1.5 months at 3 different border posts in the mountains, which did result in a welcome change of pace. Those border posts were at Rietenwinkel, Winkelmoos, and Schlesing. All 3 were about 15 or 20 miles southwest of Traunstein, as the crow flies. Rietenwinkel and Schlesing are shown on this map. Winkelmoos was a much smaller village, about 10 miles east of Rietenwinkel. My first border duty was in Rietenwinkel, starting on November 20th. It was a very attractive little resort town, stretched out along a road running through a valley. Steep mountains surrounded the town, with very rugged country everywhere you looked. There were lots of small hotels called guest houses scattered around the town, and many of them had colorful scenes painted on their outside walls, typical of alpine villages, I'm guessing. This was the building we occupied while stationed there. My room was on the 3rd floor, right under that large cafe sign. This was the view from my window. It was quite spectacular. We arranged with the women of the family that owned the house to do the cooking for us. As we had hoped, they were able to make our army rations actually taste pretty good. Our guard duty schedule was 6 hours on, 6 hours off. Besides eating and sleeping on our off time, we did some sledding and some mountain climbing. We gave up on the sledding after only a few runs, because it was too much work pulling the heavy sled back up the steep hill. While mountain climbing one time, we came upon 6 mountain goats. That was quite a sight. Note the man up on the roof of this house shoveling the snow off. I purchased these last 6 pictures in a photo shop in Rietenwinkel. I knew I could never take pictures this good with my camera. We stayed at this border post for about 3 weeks, and then returned to Traunstein as the winter snows were beginning to close things in. My posting to Winkelmoos was for 9 days in January. This is the building we occupied there, and our guard post was in that 1-story extension on the left. Very convenient for us. We had to eat K-rations part of the time we were there because of a gasoline shortage which limited supply trips from Traunstein, they told us. This is a real 1-horse open sleigh, but I'm only pretending to drive it. I knew nothing about horses or sleighs. This is one of my skiing buddies. We even built a little ski jump on a hill behind our billets. It's a wonder we didn't kill ourselves. While we were there in the Winkelmoos, we noticed the Germans using sleds to bring logs down from the mountains. We learned that they cut the trees down in the fall before the snow comes, and then bring them down in the winter with their sleds. We went deer hunting a couple of times in hopes that we could get some fresh meat, but didn't even see any deer tracks. While mountain climbing on another day, we saw deer, mountain goat, and rabbit tracks, but no animals. My final border posting in the Alps was in Schlesing, seen here from our guard post just outside the town. Schlesing was larger and not quite as attractive as the other posts. We were originally scheduled for just 1 week here, but it turned into 2 weeks because transportation back to Traunstein was not available. We stayed in this small guest house next to the road, and our guard post was this small hut about 50 yards from the guest house. Our guard schedule was 4 hours on and 12 hours off, with 2 GIs on duty at all times. The Austrian border was about 5 miles down this road. This go-anywhere jeep-sized tracked vehicle was called a weasel, very essential in getting people and supplies to these mountain posts when the roads were snowed in. Also fun to ride in. At this post, we augmented our army rations by trading sugar, candy, crackers, and cigarettes from our K rations for eggs, fresh-baked black bread, and real potatoes from the German villagers. On weekdays, grade school kids would pass by our guard post, going to and from school in the village. We got to know each other pretty well. One afternoon, we got into a terrific snowball fight, with about 20 of them. It was a blast. We finally drove them off, or else they maybe had to get home for supper. Kids are kids everywhere. This is a funeral procession going from the village out to the cemetery, on the road that passes by our guest house and our guard post. And this is the church in the village where they just came from. Here's a few of the gang of GIs at this post. We were a small but happy-go-lucky bunch. Many GI smokers took to pipe smoking during combat when cigarettes were hard to get, hence the many pipes you see in this picture. And finally, a winter storm brewing in the mountains. About a month before I started home, our company moved into new billets in the outskirts of Traunstein, about a mile from our old billets. We moved into the Prinz Ludwig Heim, shown here on the map. In peacetime it had been a moderately priced hotel, but like our previous billets, it had served as a hospital during the war. Note the large crosses painted on the roof. It was like moving into the lap of luxury. We each had a private room. This was my room. And most of the rooms had private balconies. There was a big long front porch with plenty of chairs to lounge in or to sleep in. It had a beautiful dining room with tablecloths and waitress service, no less. And I only had 4 weeks to enjoy it. Why couldn't we have been here from the beginning? As you can see from these pictures, we really did enjoy our new digs. We even adopted a little puppy who seemed to belong there. Here's a group of GIs falling out for guard duty, which included rifle inspection. And here's a group doing close order drilling out on the drill field. and a volleyball game in progress on the volleyball court. All in all, it was a nice way to end my occupation duty. Finally, the moment arrived when I had accumulated enough points to go home. Here we are, the lucky GIs, waiting patiently in front of our billets for the start of our long journey home. We left Traunstein on May 7th, and I didn't arrive home in Madison until June 11th. 5 long weeks, over 6,000 miles. It was quite a trip. The first leg of that long journey was by truck from Traunstein to Bamberg, Germany, passing through Munich and Nuremberg, and traveling on Hitler's pride and joy, the Autobahn. Loading our duffel bags onto the trucks. Those bags could hold an awful lot of stuff, and they could be quite heavy when full. This is a rest stop along the Autobahn, somewhere between Rosenheim and Munich. We stopped here at Hotel America in Munich for lunch. It's a transient hotel for GIs. Typical German countryside along the Autobahn. We have arrived in Bamberg. This is the motor pool where all the trucks ended up. This picture shows us outside the mess hall, waiting in the chow line with our mess kits, which we had with us for the whole trip. Here's the mess hall again after the meal was over. That building on the left in the background is where we stayed overnight in Bamberg. We slept on cots under very crowded conditions, as you can see here. The next morning after breakfast, we waited for the trucks to take us to the railroad station. The second leg of our journey was by train from Bamberg to Le Havre, France, through Luxembourg and Belgium. This is a castle along the railroad tracks, still in Germany. The railroad station in Namur, Belgium, one of the larger cities we passed through. Another city in Belgium. We're in France now, and the train is about to enter a tunnel. A railroad station somewhere in France. One of many delays we encountered in France. Looks like new French automobiles on those flat cars next to us. Another frustrating stop. Those railroad cars we were riding in looked about 100 years old, and they were very uncomfortable and noisy. It was almost impossible to get any sleep on that long train journey. Here's a bombed-out factory in France, and another factory that appears to be back in business. Our train is entering the outskirts of Le Havre. Camp Philip Morris was a staging area in Le Havre where we waited and slept until our ship came in and was ready to board. I don't remember how long we had to wait, but I suspect it was several days. This sign at Camp Philip Morris was supposed to inform us when any particular ship was in port, or ready to board, or scheduled to leave. These scenes show some of the extensive damage the port of Le Havre sustained during the war. A tugboat and a couple of workboats. The ship we were scheduled to take was a German passenger liner before the war. The Army took it over, converted it to a troop ship, and renamed it to the George Washington. This is its pre-war appearance. This last picture is another troop ship, probably preparing for its journey home. We're gathered on the pier alongside our ship, waiting for the boarding process to begin. As always, fulfilling the motto of the U.S. Army, hurry up and wait. I think we spent the better part of a whole day waiting. I took these next two pictures to show how much the tide changed while we waited. That ship in the background in this picture is another troop ship, docked on the other side of the same pier. Boarding has begun for us, and you'll note we had to carry our own duffel bags as we went up the gangplank. Looking back down on the pier from the deck of our ship, our boarding process is completed, and those GIs down there are heading for that other ship. These are a couple of scenes on the deck of our ship. And these are pictures of the cargo loading process. It took a long time to get us all on board and settled in our quarters, and to complete the cargo loading process, but finally we were ready to head out to sea. The third leg of this long journey was about to begin, crossing the North Atlantic. I took only a few pictures during that long sea voyage, because there wasn't much to see except water and sky. In fact, I don't remember much at all about that part of the journey, not even how many days we were at sea. Our first sight of home was this lightship near the entrance to New York Bay. Coming into New York Harbor, we saw these scenes. This is the pier on Long Island that our ship is heading for. And the tugboat is coming out to escort us in. Easing up to the pier. And the gangplank is now in place. We transferred in groups from our ship to the Staten Island ferry, which took us over to Staten Island. We're getting a last look at the George Washington, the ship that brought us home safely. The Statue of Liberty comes into view, a great sight for homesick GIs. And the Manhattan skyline is another great sight. After leaving the ferry, we were taken to Camp Kilmer, New Jersey, to wait for the processing of our discharge papers and for orders to report to our respective separation centers. My separation center was Fort Sheridan, where I was inducted into the Army just a little more than 21 months earlier. These are scenes around Camp Kilmer. The fourth and final leg of this long journey was about to begin, from New York to Madison. From Camp Kilmer, I traveled by train to Fort Sheridan. I only took 3 more pictures, probably because I ran out of film. These pictures happened to be taken while I was passing through Cleveland, Ohio. I was officially discharged at Fort Sheridan, and then I traveled by train again to Madison via Milwaukee, arriving in Madison on June 11th, 1946, thus ending my short but interesting career as a soldier in the U.S. Army. This is my last picture as a soldier, probably taken at Fort Sheridan. And this is that all-important document that sent me happily back to civilian life, my discharge certificate.